We ask that you hold your questions until we complete our presentation. You are encouraged to write any questions in the chat box as you think of them. We will answer them in the order received. Each person will have a maximum of 3 minutes to ask a question or make a comment at the end of this meeting. Your written questions and comment, of course, can be any length and will be answered by email. Please remember that this meeting is about the federal EPA granting opportunities for environmental cleanup at Hillcrest. The people presenting have expertise in this area. As you are well aware, there are many aspects of the Hillcrest redevelopment project. We ask that you keep your questions and comment to the subject matter and help us work to stay on topic. The rest of our group, Steve Hiram, is an environmental analyst at Stoll Reeves and is our consultant who is writing this grant, and we'll discuss the EPA Brownfields granting process as well as this grant specifically. The draft grant is available for you on our website to review. Then we have Ken Larson, Vice President of Braun Intertech. He is our environmental remediation consultant and will discuss how the environmental investigation of Hillcrest has been conducted and what are the current plans on how it will be cleaned up. Lastly, I'm Ava Langston Kinney. I'm a project manager for the St. Paul Port Authority. I have worked at the Port Authority for about 5 years. In 2019, this group of port employees and consultants before you were successful in getting a $300,000 EPA Brownfields assessment grant that helped us get to the point where we can start talking about cleanup. My job is to do everything I can to coordinate the delivery of a $500,000 fiscal year 2022 EPA Brownfields cleanup grant to the port to help Monty to coordinate the cleanup of Hillcrest. I present to you Monty Hillman.
May we have for that wonderful introduction, Ava. I think we've got some slides we'll share here. Yes. All right. All right, folks. Welcome. Thanks for sharing your time with us, and thanks for your interest in the cleanup of the Hillcrest site. For those of you that are not familiar with the St. Paul Port Authority, the St. Paul Port Authority's mission is to serve as a conduit to quality job opportunities and champion redevelopment projects that expand the tax base, advance equitable and sustainable development, and support commerce on the Mississippi River. We are an agency that's been around for about 90 years. We were created by the state legislature. We're a small organization, only 18 people. And we originally were created to manage river commerce and the millions of tons of commodities that come and go in the St. Paul Harbor, the uppermost navigable portion for barge and commodity traffic on the Mississippi River. In the 1960s, we were given additional powers by the state, and we started doing urban redevelopment work inland, largely commercial industrial redevelopment work. That has resulted in 21 Port Authority business centers, including our river terminals, which house over 550 companies and over 25,000 jobs. So we see this portfolio as really a strong piece of the commercial industrial backbone of St. Paul's economy and the region's economy. We also, in addition to cleaning up largely brownfields, distressed properties, we're a public sector land developer primarily. We are usually a buyer of last resort of distressed properties that the private market can't really pencil out. And so we get involved and bring wealth of experience and expertise and access to public financing mechanisms and tools and apply that to make these parcels attractive for private investment once we've completed our work. We also have statewide programs. We are the country's maybe 4th largest PACE lender, Property Assessed Clean Energy. We've got about $300 million of financing we've completed around the state of Minnesota for renewable energy, largely solar, and for energy efficiency programs for new construction and retrofits. We also offer some of this expertise statewide through Port Consulting, which is our third-party consulting arm, where we help other municipalities and public-facing organizations and private organizations with their distressed property challenges of various sorts. Currently serving over at the Snelling Midway site here locally, as well as up in Bemidji on an active brownfield cleanup site. A little bit of background on what we've done to date. The St. Paul Port Authority acquired the site in 2019. We did our due diligence and did some environmental assessment work at that time using EPA funds. Our intent, of course, as an economic development organization, was to make sure we could bring good paying jobs, living wage jobs with low barriers to entry to the site. Our agreement with the city when we purchased the site was that the game plan out of the gate was for it to be a mixed use redevelopment with residential, commercial, a light industrial business center, and green space uses. The goal is 1,000 housing units and 1,000 jobs on site. We are currently supporting the City of St. Paul's master planning process while we continue to do engineering analysis of environmental and other issues on site. And the cleanup work for the soil and other issues on site will be performed concurrent with the grading and infrastructure. We hope to begin turning dirt on the remediation in the fall of 2022. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ava, I believe. Thank you, Ava.
Yes, yes. So as I spoke before, this group has been able to deliver the $300,000 assessment grant to this project, and we are applying for the U.S. EPA Brownfields Cleanup Grant for this fiscal year, 2022. We are requesting $500,000, and $100,000 of that will be matched from the Port Authority. The grant application submission date is December 1st. Part of the grant application is our need to document that you, the community, has had an opportunity to review this grant application and to ask any questions you might have about this grant application and the proposed cleanup plan as it stands now. As Monty has said to you, but as Monty has just said, the cleanup plan, the dirt being turned over, the mass grading is going to have to match the master planning process, which we hope will be finished in late spring. The EPA requires, like, as I said, the public review of this application and all the attachments. And one of the attachments specifically is the analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives, which Ken is going to be speaking to us about. But before Ken gets started on the remediation, Steve is going to talk to us about the EPA Brownfields granting process and this particular grant application that he wrote. Steve?
You're muted, Steve.
Steve, you need to unmute yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to talk about our grant application we put together. The EPA has about $13 million that available for cleanup grants. Seems like a lot of money, but that works out to about 26 grants that would be spread across the entire country. So it's really rather competitive to get a grant, and we have 10 pages to convince the EPA that this project deserves a grant. EPA provides guidance on the information they want, and it's divided into 4 sections, and you see those 4 sections up on the screen there. Within those 4 sections, they ask specific questions and specific informations, and like I said, we have 10 pages to put it all in. First thing we do in the project area description is to tell our brownfield story. We want something compelling to get the EPA interested in this project. And a brownfield story is basically industry jobs moving out of an area leaves contamination, and that contaminated property is difficult to redevelop without government assistance to first clean it up. And we believe we have a good brownfield story in the east side. Next thing in that section is to talk about, once we clean it up, what are all the good things we're going to do? So we have a vision for the redevelopment, and we describe all the benefits that are going to come out of cleaning up and redeveloping this property. There's a lot of contaminated property across the country, as you can imagine, and a lot of good projects that can come out of it. The EPA wants to provide assistance to communities with the greatest need. And they have different ways, different parameters to look at. What does the community have greater needs? What is the needs of the community? There are things like, what's the level of private investment in a community compared to, say, other parts of St. Paul or the Twin Cities or across the country? They look at high poverty levels, high crime. They look at, is there pollution in the area that's contributing to health issues in the community? And they look at environmental justice issues. And we describe that in this community need section. Community engagement. Community engagement is, well, we're doing that right now. EPA wants a community to have the opportunity to provide comment on cleanup plans and have input into how the property is going to be redeveloped. The Port Authority is, well, I think they've been doing a good job for the last year and a half of involving the community, and we're moving into the final stages of master planning and cleanup planning. The port is developing a process that will go through the end of master planning and then continue to inform the city and give the community and give them community opportunities to stay informed and be involved in the redevelopment of Hillcrest. So that brings us to the third category of the grant application and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on. This section is section 3. We describe the contamination, describe our cleanup plan. We present a $600,000 budget for cleaning up. Now that's a portion of the entire cleanup, but they're just looking at how are you going to spend the money if we give you a grant. So provide a budget, show them how we got there, and then measuring progress. The EPA wants to know that you promise a bunch of things in the grant application. EPA wants to know that you're delivering on those. So you report quarterly, annually, and in this part of the application, we describe how we're going to do that. And then the last section is actually the easiest section to write for me. It's the EPA wants to know if the Port Authority gets a grant, are they going to manage the grant, and are they going to be able to deliver on the promises they present in the grant. And the Port Authority, fortunately for me, has been doing this for decades. They've been cleaning up and redeveloping property. And since the late 90s, they've gotten multiple EPA grants and managed it. So I just basically describe what's been going on for the past 20 years or so, 30, whatever. I think that's it for the grant application. And yeah, next slide. So what does the community get out of getting a cleanup grant? You get a cleanup grant, Hillcrest gets cleaned up and the property gets redeveloped. In the grant application, we'll describe some of the benefits that are going to come out of redeveloping this property. And this is just a short list of many benefits that will come out of it. The development plan is is estimated to provide at least 1,000 livable wage jobs with goals of low barriers to hire, and there will be incentives to hire from the east side. The whole development project is estimated to bring in about $250 million in private investment, which is going to substantially increase the tax base. And that money can be funneled back into community services for communities in need. Sustainable green, that's basically stuff like renewable energy and energy efficient buildings. We're using this U.S. Green Build Council Lead for Communities as a guidance to things that will be done or designed that will be sustainably green. Additional workforce. We're also going to have housing in this project, as you may know. We're estimating to provide about 1,000 units of workforce housing, and there's going to be about, I think it's 20 acres of green space, which will include active park plans and regional trails. So I think Ken, you're up next. Start talking about the cleanup and
All right.
contamination.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Ken Larson. Been working with the Port Authority on this property since 2019, conducting environmental investigations to determine what needs to be done to safely redevelop and reuse the property. To date, we've collected hundreds of samples, probably around 400 to date, at various locations and depths across the site, to find out where the contamination is and what types of contamination, and just as importantly, where it is not, so we can focus on what needs to be done in the context of repurposing the site. So from a high level standpoint, our investigations have identified three basic types of contamination. We have petroleum impacts related to past maintenance areas. There's a maintenance area along McKnight, kind of on the east side of the property, that had a history of some above ground and underground storage tanks that use petroleum products. Now, some of this contamination occurred and was identified in the past from past testing that was done when they removed underground storage tanks, and those petroleum impacts were further investigated at that time to the degree necessary to get leak site closure from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. However, there's still some residual contamination in those areas that were part and focused on our investigation, and we did find some manageable but present levels of the soil and groundwater impacts of petroleum in that part of the site. But we didn't find any other widespread petroleum impacts on other areas. One of the more prominent issues was related to mercury contamination at the site, and this was been identified and found on the golf greens, former golf greens, on tee boxes, and some of the fairways across the site. And it's from the historic use of fungicides, and this was a process that happened quite a lot on northern climate golf courses, and it dates back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, into the actual, I think it was like 1994 when the product was eventually banned by US EPA. But basically, mold would grow on their priority grasses, particularly greens, and they would apply small amounts of a mercury-containing fungicide to, which would help with their limit the amount of mold that would grow. But this over time would just accumulate, and what we're finding is elevated concentrations of mercury have accumulated in the upper 6 inches to a foot, and in some cases it might go a little deeper, up to maybe 2 feet on the greens. But we're also finding it on tee boxes at lower concentrations, but usually only the upper 6 inches to a foot on tee boxes, and mostly about the upper 6 inches to a foot on fairways as well, though not every fairway. So the investigation is ongoing, and we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's to verify which specific areas will need to be included in future cleanup. There's also some areas, and you can imagine a golf course that has 100+ years of use. There were some activities in the past where they pushed some previous buildings or structures or debris that's in piles at kind of one of the east wetlands where there's some intermixed solid waste in. Again, it's not a huge environmental, like human health risk, but it's something that needs to be addressed for redevelopment. And near the former clubhouse as well, there were a former pool and structures related to previous structures that, rather than remove it back in the day, they just kind of left it in place, and you don't see it now, but we found some of that evidence of that during our investigations. So can you go to the next page? Let's see, there we go. So just to look, plan view, we have north is to the left on this. So we can see McKnight is on the top, Larpenteur is going in the up-down on the left part of the screen, but the distribution of contaminants, not surprisingly, looks like a golf course. So we have, in this case, the former greens, and what we can tell from historic aerial photographs as well as interviews is that the general layout of the course has not changed over time, and that's very helpful since we're looking for some of these historic impacts. So we got greens, the blue item, or the blue objects are the former tee boxes, and we're not finding it on every tee box, but on many of the tee boxes. And then the fairways, we're continuing to do our assessment to identify which fairways or portions of fairways are going to need to be included or have mercury exceeding our overall cleanup standards. You can see a blue hatch box over by the clubhouse. The clubhouse is kind of on the left middle side of the, I don't know if you can see my cursor, probably not, since I'm not, but that's an area where we had the former pool structure and pool that's still, buried in that part of the property. And then near the southeast corner, which is kind of the upper right, you can see some areas where there's a wetland and some piles of debris and soil that we've identified. So as we said, and Monty mentioned, that the cleanup needs to be coordinated with site grading, and you can see some of these areas are widespread across the entire property. So we need to make sure that we come up with an approach that addresses the elevated mercury concentrations in those areas before mass grading and major removal of soil occurs, so that we have cleanup and we're not causing contaminants to be moved to places on the site where they were not intended. So can you go to the next? So let's talk about the analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives, what both Ava and Steve referred to. It's part of the EPA process, and the ABCA, its purpose, it's to provide information at a very high level on the contamination issues at the site and looking at some possible cleanup alternatives. Typical for an ABCA is you look at 3 alternatives, one of which is no action at all. We looked at actually 4, and I'll go through each of those and provide some just very high-level comments on each as we go through that. No action, obviously, if our goal was to do nothing with the site and keep a fence around it for forever, that is something that could be considered, because you'd be limiting the access to the site. However, that's not really something that can be considered for a site where you're looking at redevelopment and reuse and repurposing. Phytoremediation is it's an interesting process where you actually are using plants and vegetation to remove contaminants a little at a time. Through it actually will take the contaminants out of the soil and either break it down or it goes up into the vegetative part of the plant, where it changes form from being in the soil to in the plant. This is something that works for a lot of different contaminants, but can take many years to drop the contaminant levels to what might be suitable for redevelopment. So it needs to be considered in that context, as well as for mercury. Mercury doesn't actually break down. It's one of the the fundamental elements that so you can't take mercury and break it down into something less toxic. All you're doing is moving that molecule of mercury from the soil and putting it in something else, and it's still there. And so that's something that needs to be considered as far as that's concerned. Alternatives 3 and 4 are very common in the brownfields and cleanup of distressed properties or contaminated properties. Alternative 3 was soil excavation and offsite disposal, and that's exactly what it sounds like, is you're taking the contaminated portions of the site. We talked about the upper 6 inches or a foot, or depending on the location, it's actually excavated, put into trucks and hauled to a permitted landfill where it is disposed of in accordance with their permits and regulations. And alternative 4 is a process of soil excavation, again targeting where the contamination is and removing the contaminated soil, and using a portion of that. Usually it's the lower level impacted material where it can be possibly reconsolidated on site in a safe manner. And usually the issue with contaminated soils is direct exposure. So where now it's at the ground surface, it would be in the context of a grading project. There might be areas of the site where it can be reconsolidated and placed in a safe manner, which would not cause a public health risk or environmental risk. And then you would still look at offsite disposal for some of the higher level contaminated soils. So those are the 4 basic, and now the ABCA is issued in draft. It's intended to be a working document as it goes through the process. It'll be incorporated into the final site cleanup plans that are ultimately reviewed and with the community, project partners, regulatory agencies, and it gets finalized, before cleanup occurs or you use any of the EPA grant monies. So these are some pictures of the site, just to give you and I'm sure you're all familiar with with the site as it is right now. These are a little bit on a cloudy day here, but we got the east midpoint, so that's along McKnight, probably not too far from the maintenance areas, looking west, looking at some of the trees and longer grasses and along that area of the site. And the other one is on the opposite side, the west midpoint of the site looking east. Looks very similar, but again, with the trees and overgrown grasses. Next page, please. Northeast corner, that'd be near Larpenteur and McKnight. Looking south, you can see there's a pond up in that corner. You can kind of see that off on the left of that photo. And then finally, the southeast corner, looking at some of the grade changes and hills, and it just gives you an idea of what's present now. Now, the alternative that's currently being considered is it's alternative number 4, which is going to be a combination of offsite disposal, which would target at a minimum the greens where we have the highest concentrations of mercury, but then there are some opportunities for on-site consolidation and reuse of materials, subject to finishing and finalizing what the final site grades are going to be. So this is a little bit in process as they go through the master planning process, and we do the parallel civil engineering related to redevelopment, looking for those areas where that may be an option that can be safely considered and ultimately approved by the regulatory agencies. And I just want to state that any option that's selected, there will be a formal site cleanup plan that's prepared that outlines all the steps that will be taken, where the contamination is, how it's going to be excavated, what is going off site, what can be managed on site, and what it would require approval by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture related to the mercury, as well as the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So it has a substantial regulatory oversight component, and the cleanup plans will include dust control requirements for to make sure that there's nothing during the process of cleaning up that's going to cause a concern for nearby residents, which is always when you're doing a cleanup near existing homes, there'll be strict dust control and stormwater related precautions and protections to make sure that the everything is managed appropriately, and there'll be documentation, soil sampling or post-excavation to verify that cleanup standards have been achieved for the various areas that are going to be developed. So it's a bit in process. The cleanup plan has not yet been prepared. It's being built kind of as the engineering is and the future uses and the master planning process continues. So it's a work in process, but that's where we are at this time. So questions and or comments for any of us, Ava?
Yes. May we still have the last two slides? Yes. Again, let's let the special effects go. There you go. We are here to answer any questions or comments that you may have. And I would like to remind you that there are copies of the draft application, including the draft analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives, this ABCA that can explain to us pretty thoroughly, as well as the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments. Plus, other geotechnical documents are available for public review and written comment until November the 26th. We have placed them at a couple of libraries and some websites. The hard copies are at the Hayden Heights Library and the George Latimer Central Library. Online, you can find them at the Hillcrest page of the St. Paul Port Authority website. You may email your comments to me, and my email address is real simple, alk@sppa.com. We are here to answer any questions that you might have. Any questions or concerns? Anything that we can explain more thoroughly?
John has a hand up.
Okay.
Mr. Metza.
Yes. How confident are you that grant will come through? If it doesn't come through, what's the fallback plan and how does that affect the timeline?
John, that is a funding issue, and I'm going to turn that over to Monty to explain how Hillcrest is going to be remediated.
John, thanks for the question. We've been very successful over the years, since about 2003, with one of the first EPA pilot grants for this kind of cleanup. Before COVID, I had a lateral file drawer of the history from 2003 through 2000, whatever it was, 19, of every grant paper copies of every grant and every grant document that we've ever done with EPA. And it was actually a very extraordinary amount across cleanup grants, assessment grants, what they call revolving loan fund grants. Been very, very successful. I think we've applied about every year we've been eligible for various projects and out of these three funds. And I think we've gotten turned down for a couple of assessment grants over the years. And did we go for a cleanup grant last year on this one and not get it, or we were not ready for a cleanup grant last year?
We did apply for a cleanup grant last year, and for technical reasons, did not.
Yeah, it's the federal government, so it's an exercise in bureaucracy. We love our friends at EPA Region 5 in Chicago, but it is a federal process, so a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of opportunity to get asked to exit the very aggressive competition because there are so many folks that want to get these funds. So I think we've got a very high rate of success historically. I think we've got a high probability of success this time. We do have other funds specifically targeted for remediation that are available to us if this grant does not come through. Part of the issue is some of those funds are more flexible and can be used across the city on any site. And so we try to not use those if we can get funds that are targeted for a specific site. We like to try and keep the dollars that can be used anywhere in the city available as long as possible. We try to preserve those and use those last and go to the feds, the state, Met Council, and the county to get these site-specific funds as a priority, and just to be most efficient with these public dollars. So we've got a very good shot at getting this, and if we don't, the cleanup will still proceed.
John, I would like to add that about a year ago, we also had some public notice that we were going to get a $1.2 million revolving loan fund grant for Hillcrest, which is in place. I'm going to ask Monty again to stand by to fill in just in case I don't, that I don't explain it properly. But about in 2012, was that the year that we first received several $1 million in revolving loan fund opportunities from EPA. Now, that does not mean that EPA, hands us over several $1 million and says, and we have it sitting in the bank somewhere. However, they guarantee that if you are able to loan out this money, that they will reimburse you for the work that is done. And so we have in place, and just recently, so actually this September, we have in place $1.2 million of revolving loan fund money that is available for the cleanup.
Okay.
That is a great description, Ava. It's a grant program from EPA to the port to create a revolving loan fund. So in that case, those are actually loan dollars that do have to be repaid, but we can repay them out of any number of sources over the course of a long period of time at a very low interest rate.
Yes.
So the federal government really helps out in that regard as well. But again, $500,000 of grant money is more attractive than $500,000 of loan.
Exactly.
I think any business owner like yourself would understand.
Certainly, yeah. Okay. What's going to go on between this kind of off target between now and the fall, besides the public comment parts? I'm trying to understand the process here.
I'll start out, and I will say that as the cleanup opportunities that, or I should say the different options that we are reviewing at the ABCA are keyed directly to the master planning process. We will clean up the site, how the land use is decided upon. And as you're well aware, the port is working with the city to finalize that master planning process, which we hope to be completed in the late spring or early summer. And once we know what pieces of property are going to, in Hillcrest, are going to be used for what purposes, then we know how we need to clean up the site because the site needs to be cleaned up such that there is no route of exposure for any contamination. Ken, Monty, join in and to make it clear.
I will just say as to the process, if you and John haven't seen, just tonight actually, the Master Planning Community Advisory Committee is meeting to review what we believe is something close to the final land use plan. That has been worked on for months now through a variety of technical issues about infrastructure and road connections and wetlands and everything. So this evening, the Community Advisory Committee will see that final final from the consultant's perspective, but now it goes to the committee. The committee will have a chance to view it and make a recommendation about it. They probably won't make a recommendation tonight. They hopefully will make a recommendation in December. And then there would begin a formal approval process through the Planning Commission with public hearings, through City Council with public hearings. We hope, as Ava said, that is wrapped up by the end of first quarter next year. Ken and his team will begin working on the actual engineering and the cleanup plan. Steve will guide us in working with the regulator, which is the Department of Agriculture here in this case. So that way we can, by late summer, begin cleanup. And that would keep us on track for delivery of sites to buyers in late 2023 with enough roads and utilities and stuff in place that we hope to see ground up construction start in late 2023 and building occupancies as soon as those buildings could be complete, likely late 2024 for the light industrial portion.
So once the cleanup plan's put together, it'll go out for bids?
We will have to publicly bid it. There is, of the earthwork, we imagine the first public contract will be a big grading contract, a mass grading and remediation contract. That will have to be publicly bid. There's probably $2 to $3 million worth of remediation. There's another $10 to $12 million of just geotechnical and grading just to get pads to the right elevation, get roadways to the right elevation. So there's going to be a year's worth of earthwork just to get things ready, get the site cleaned up. So summer public bid, the sooner we can get started, late summer, early fall. The one risk is that in Minnesota, starting $10 or $12 million of moving 500,000 yards of dirt in November, is generally not a great idea. It gets really wet and things get frozen and you cannot really compact wet soil, frozen soil. So we really need to keep the wheels on the bus and keep the process moving so we don't lose a whole construction season if we don't get started in late summer, early fall next year.
Sure. Okay. Very interesting.
Joan? Oh, you're muted, Joan.
You're muted.
At this. Sorry, I'm not very good at this, so
No problem. We got this.
But anyway, my question is because of the neighbors. I live like 3 blocks from this, and they're all concerned when when they start doing all this, will they be protected from all that junk? I mean, I'm hearing you guys, but I got to have a way to explain to them that yes, they will be protected and they don't have to worry about their plants. They don't have to worry about breathing. It's all these things that people come to me with, and I understand, but I need, is there somewhere that I can read or somewhere I can get more information for myself to be able to explain to these people what exactly will be done to protect them once you start doing the mediation, okay?
And I should look too. I can add that we put something on our website that talked about the use of water. Does that make sense to Ava or to Ken? I know.
Well,
It's one of the dust mitigation strategies, but I would like Ken to talk about what typical site safety plan, dust mitigation plan looks like and where those things are housed. And maybe we can provide a sample from another cleanup where we have had a dust mitigation plan and a site safety plan in place that for these same reasons. Ken?
Certainly with in the excavation specifications, when when the contractor is out there, there are going to be requirements that there cannot be visible dust leaving the site. They're going to have to provide for dust suppression, which is usually having water trucks. They try to limit the amount of open face of excavation, and there are just certainly some days where it's just too windy where it cannot it's not practical to continue to excavate during those periods. Above and beyond that, we'll have real-time air monitoring of dust levels, particularly downwind. So that'll be adjusted on a daily basis depending on wind directions, where we actually can get there will be criteria set up to that, and obviously we don't want visible dust, but we'll have additional backup with actual dust monitors, as well as periodic actual physical samples of the air being collected that will then be, for additional verification that the process is working, and that so there would be an opportunity if, and in this type of a situation and the way the mercury is, if we're controlling the visible dust, there's not going to be a risk to the public, though it's the perception of the risk that we need to manage. So we want to make sure there are all, yes, it's but it's real. I mean, people's fears are real, and we need to address that. And so that will be a part of our program, and we'll try to set that up. And the Port Authority wants that as well. They want that documentation, because and I apologize if my phone is something stupid here, but yeah, that'll be an important part of the cleanup plan that gets approved by the agency, as well as work into the earthwork specifications. And that's all I can say in level of detail now, but we're sensitive to it, because I tell you, especially in residential areas, if we start having clouds of dust go, someone's going to hear about it, and it's probably going to be me, it's going to be Monty, it's going to be, we don't want that.
I've gotten those phone calls for many, many years, and we do pay close attention to how these cleanups impact the communities they're located in. I see Andrea posted a link in the chat, one of our blog posts about soil and dust suppression. Ken, the way you just described it was very succinct and also very detailed, and more so than I would have done, or more so than we have probably done for public consumption. I wonder if it doesn't make sense to have you lay out almost exactly what you just said in a one-pager for folks that, they see what Andrea posted, which is our way of trying to distill this down into a digestible chunk. But for folks that want more, for folks that want that next level of detail, that's probably more of a half page or a page-long exercise like you just walked us through verbally. Does that help you with your neighbors, Joan?
Mute.
Oh, you're muted again.
Yeah, I unmuted, sorry. I just automatically do that. I'm used to Zoom, and I'm always muting myself because I know there's this street is so noisy right here. Yeah, that's great. And I understand, and Monty knows, and Andrea knows that I've been involved since the beginning. So I get it for myself. But I'm always having neighbors stop me because I'm one of them dumb people who walk the neighborhood, so everybody knows you, and they know you're involved, so they want to know everything. And I try to explain to them, but it's hard for me, who knows nothing, to deal with explaining to people who they really don't want to hear anyway. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but Monty knows what I mean, and you guys probably do too. And so writing it out in something that I could have with me, would be really valuable for me, because that way it's not just Joan telling, it's coming from somebody who knows something. Okay, rather than just this local person. Not that I don't have a master's degree in education, but I don't have anything to do with any of you, what you guys know. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for all this time. I really appreciate being invited to this. Thank you. I really think, to me, knowledge is power. So thank you so much.
Well, we'll get something together for you, Joan, and share that both with you personally, but also on our website and more broadly. And Ken, if it has a Braun logo on it, maybe that gives it an additional imprimatur of something other than just the Port Authority said it. As we start to develop that cleanup plan, there could even be figures developed showing folks where these air monitors would be located. We will have to develop all that sort of stuff for the regulators. So we can be as transparent as possible when it comes to the site safety plan, dust mitigation, et cetera.
Joan, I would just like to ask one more question regarding the concern about, dust. Is I would think that the community, the residents, or the residents right around Hillcrest would be interested in knowing about noise, the traffic impacts as well associated with this mass grading. And maybe we can coordinate all of that so that this fall, which we hope will be the time, as Monty said, next November is kind of iffy, but if we can find some way to give the community regular updates so they know the weeks that all the trucks are going to be going down various streets and what their route might be, and that kind of thing, because it seems to me that residents would be interested in those three things: dust, noise, traffic impacts. When this mass grading is actually going to occur, what are the hours of operation? When does the noise stop? When does it start in the morning? That kind of thing.
It's also important to recognize by the time true mass grading and major earthwork occurs, the cleanup will already have been documented. We will have addressed a lot of we need to remove the contaminants to allow for that to occur. Dust control is still going to be a requirement, so also letting people know when cleanup starts or stops, is important as well.
It is part of our standard operating procedure to have some ongoing communication and updates during construction. So when this contract is about to be bid, we'll be making that known to folks and providing regular weekly or monthly construction updates throughout this process. So we'll keep the lines of communication open with you and your neighbors, obviously.
I can sympathize with you because my employees ask me daily, when are we moving to our new building? So every time they bump into the corner of a table because we're so out of space here and packed so tight, didn't you say we're building a new building?
We're getting ready for you. We're getting ready for you.
Okay. I have to leave the meeting now.
Thank
you so much. This was very helpful. Very, very helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
I look forward to the next meeting. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, bye-bye.
So if we do not have any other questions, then we will close the meeting. So last call for questions. Feel free between now and the 26th of November to send an email to me directly or to ask the question through our website. And please, Joan, pass that on to everybody who might be interested, who was unable to attend this morning. Well, thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.